Committee for organizing this program today. Thanks to our presenters, Jessica Feierman, Kevin Bethel, Marcus Jarvis, and Malik Pickett at the Juvenile Law Center for their work on content development, program design, and overall leadership. We are also most grateful to the help of Kathy Youngman for her technology support and recording of the program. Mission of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan civic organization, encourages informed, active participation in citizenship, elections, and democracy, and works to increase understanding about major public policy issues through education and advocacy. Civic education is and always has been a priority for the League. Over the last year, we have partnered with the NAACP Media Branch to sponsor a series of presentations focused on the 2020 general election and criminal justice. In the fall of 2019, the Civic Education Program examined criminal justice in Delaware County with a look at sentencing, probation, and parole. This year, we decided to continue this theme and take a closer look at the rights, dignity, equity, and opportunity for youth in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. These educational programs, along with ongoing voter registration efforts with the prison and monitoring of meetings of the Delaware County Jail Oversight Board, will remain an important issue for civic education and the League moving forward. Today's program on juvenile justice is moderated by Jessica Feierman, Senior Managing Director of the Juvenile Law Center. Moderate a panel of experts on how juvenile justice issues have been impacted by the pandemic, as well as the Black Lives Matter and defund police movements, and what is being done to address these issues now and in the future. Jessica will introduce our panel when we begin the program. We received many of your excellent questions prior to this event, and these were shared with Jessica. Please feel free to utilize the chat function and ask any additional questions. Also, we are recording this event, and a link to the recording will be sent to those that registered. The recorded program will also be available on our website. At the end of the program, I will take a few moments to share our upcoming events. Thank you very much for joining us today. Jessica, take it away.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be here. Thanks so much to the League of Women Voters and to the NAACP for having us to talk about juvenile justice, not just for bringing us together, but really for caring about these issues. Young people are brought into the juvenile justice system across our state and across our country every day, and to bring people together to really think about what does the system look like and what might it look like if we work together to create something better is really valuable to us. So in 1 second, I'm going to introduce our panelists. I just want to take a moment to give you some background on the juvenile justice system. I assume many of you may know a lot about the system. Some of you may be newer to it. This system is one that from the get-go, theoretically was set up to be kinder and gentler and more responsive to the reality that young people are not just miniature adults. And from the very beginning of the juvenile justice system, we have seen really harsh and devastating racial inequality in the system, disparities in the way young people are treated, and we still see that today. So we have we're holding two things at once, a system that has high aspirations and that has never fully met those aspirations. We're also in a moment where there are, as we all know, we're facing unprecedented times with the pandemic, and the stresses that are placed on young people in the juvenile justice system are heightened even further. And there's an opportunity for more change because we can't just do business as usual. Similarly, there is so much movement now. We know that there have been horrifying abuses of individuals in the justice system and in the community over many, many years. But now we're starting to see recordings, and now the white community, honestly, is more aware of the harms that Black individuals have been facing at the hands of some police across the country. And so again, it's a moment of sort of devastation and a moment of where we can work together to create something better. So with that, I'm really thrilled to be introducing three super fabulous panelists. First, I want to introduce my friend Kevin Bethel, the school safety chief for the school district of Philadelphia. He's also currently serving on Governor Wolf's Juvenile Justice Reform Task Force, which you'll hear a little bit about soon. Mr. Bethel formerly served as our deputy police commissioner here in Philadelphia, but really, among other those he is known for his groundbreaking work at taking a hard look at what policing is and what policing can be. Those of us who advocate for youth are always so grateful for Mr. Bethel's creative, thoughtful approach, his willingness to take a critical look at policing, and then to somehow miraculously make his ideas a reality, which has dramatically shrunk the number of young people who have gone from our public schools into police custody and into the juvenile justice system. So I won't give you all the details. He will tell you more about his work, but he is really a visionary in this field. So we're very grateful that he's joining us today. Next, I want to introduce my colleague, Marcus Jarvis. Marcus is the Outreach and Communications Associate of the Debt-Free Justice Campaign at Juvenile Law Center. For background, why we have a debt-free justice campaign is that young people in Pennsylvania and across the country may face fines and fees when they're in the justice system. So even if they're young and have no job and no means to have a job, and we want them to be in school, they can get fees imposed on them. And when they can't afford to pay those fees, they get pulled deeper and deeper into the system, causes real harm to families. And Marcus first came to Juvenile Law Center as a youth advocate in our Juveniles for Justice program to share his own experiences in the justice system and to advocate for juvenile and criminal justice reform. And we knew from the beginning that Marcus was brilliant, and his insights and expertise have only continued to grow over the years. He is now, we've been really lucky this year to bring him on full time at Juvenile Law Center to help with his insights about the reality of the justice system and how we can reshape the system to better serve young people. And last but not least, I want to introduce my colleague, Malik Pickett, who is a staff attorney at Juvenile Law Center. Malik does many, many things, but among them, he works to advocates to ensure that youth in the justice system receive services in their homes and communities whenever possible, rather than outside of the home and in placement facilities, that they have access to high quality education, and that they have opportunities for successful reentry after system involvement. Malik came to Juvenile Law Center with a background in litigation, but also a background as a legislative counsel in the Pennsylvania Senate. So we will benefit from his insights from multiple perspectives. And he is also a whiz at bringing people together and having productive conversations about tough topics that can help shape our policy. So thank you to all three of you for joining us today. What we decided we would do for you is give a little bit more background from each of our presenters just on their own work and on the justice system generally. Then focus in for a moment on the pandemic and sort of where are we in this moment? What does it mean for our system? And then turn to Black Lives Matter and defund the police and get insights on sort of where do we go from here. And then thank you to all of you who submitted questions already. We have a bunch of those covered. I guess more will hopefully be coming in through the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can. And I guess any that we don't get to, we're certainly happy to follow up by email after the presentation. So with that, let me start with the background. And Marcus, if I could start with you. Everybody find the person who's flying through space and you will be ready to go. Marcus, if you could just tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get interested in working on juvenile justice reform? And what are you working on now? And why is this issue important to you?
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me fine? I couldn't see if my microphone is working. I'm using a better microphone and I'm hoping that it is actually working. All right, that seems to be working. So,
You're clear.
all right, thanks. So I started in justice reform, working with Juvenile Law Center about 8 years ago. I was in a program that serves youth in the child welfare system, and I found out about Juvenile Law Center, and based on my experiences, they had two programs, like one for youth that were in the child welfare system and the other for youth that were in the juvenile justice system. And I felt like my story in the justice system would be more powerful. It would just kind of serve to maybe do I just felt like it would serve a bigger amount of people. Whereas though I didn't feel like my situation in the child welfare system was as bad or as, I don't know, although it's kind of hard to compare, like I don't know what you feel like is negative about it. I just felt like I just had more to speak about in the juvenile justice lane of things. So that was where, I started with Juveniles for Justice, and my work that I'm doing now is a lot based, was really based a lot on my experience of, like, when I was certified as an adult when I was 16 for basically my first conviction. It was a drug charge, and I was in Lackawanna County. So, like, they were just more harsh, and I was offered like a 1 to 2 or 3 to 6. I took what I felt like was the less time, and I just, ended up having a felony record as, when I came out at 17. So I've already, I just always had a felony record, and I just knew that going forward in life, it would like once I got out, I didn't know how much, that would affect my life in general. But once I did get out and realize, and, that, it's just so many, I was going to college and I couldn't pick certain fields to work in because having a felony, these certain fields are not receptive to people with felonies. And that's what I was talking to about the counsel, with the counselor when I'm going to the school. They're like, well, these being as though I have a felony, this is, factored into basically my whole life or what my life plan would be. So I, just dealing with that. And then a few years later, during my time working with Juvenile Law Center, I was arrested for owing court costs and fines to Lackawanna County for being incarcerated in Lackawanna County. So I spent a month in prison for owing money for being in prison. And I had to work in this like recycling plant that they had there. They took $50 a day off of my bill. And that was like, just super crazy to me. I just couldn't believe that this was like a real thing that happens in, real life. And I've worked with people, and I'm pretty sure that, the same program is going on to this day. So the work that I'm doing now with court costs and fines has always been like, really important to me personally, because even to this day, like, I literally still have these court costs and fines that I'm in the process of paying off. And like my license was suspended as part of that same sentence, and those same, fines continue until I'm 29 years old now, and I was 16 when got that sentence. And I just went down and got on a payment plan to get an arrest warrant lifted on Monday because of these fines that I still have. And it's like, I don't know, you get that amount of money that's just put on you that you feel like it's just, to a certain extent, it's impossible to try to maintain, living a life and paying to have a roof over your head and your kids and eating and maintaining what you feel like is a okay life and still be able to pay these fines. So I always felt like this was a really important topic to me, and it's something I'm, just really grateful to be able to work, in this field, on a more consistent basis, every day, because I feel like it's such an important problem and it's such an important thing that needs to be taken care of or changed with the system.
Thank you so much for that, Marcus. And unfortunately, the story Marcus just told us about his own experience in the justice system and his own fees that were imposed because of that is not an uncommon story There are a lot of young people who get pulled into the justice system early in their teenage years, often because they are acting like teenagers. And many of them end up with this kind of paralyzing, really, fees and fines. And Mark is obviously a brilliant person in a position to be moving his career forward, supporting his children, and still working on addressing those fines. So one of our goals at Juvenile Law Center certainly is to abolish fees and fines out of the juvenile justice system, and any fees and fines imposed on young people, so that we can hear young people talk about their steps forward to success rather than being pulled back into a system for being unable to pay. And so Marcus is playing a key role in helping us work with young people and families around the country on that issue. Kevin, let me turn to you. You have obviously come into the system from a different angle with years of experience in policing. And we know you've worked inside the system as our deputy police commissioner. We know you've worked outside the system as a Stoneleigh Fellow, and now you're in the school district. I wonder if you could just talk to us a little bit about your own take on policing, sort of what you initially learned about how police should act, and what you think now about what police can do and what role police can play in reform.
Okay, Jessica, thank you, and thank you to the League and NAACP for having me be a part of this session today. So as Jessica indicated, I've been in law enforcement pushing about 35 years now, in the law enforcement space. And when I walked in, I came into the police department in 1986. And when I walked in the organization, it really was based on fear. So I grew up in the same neighborhoods that I would ultimately police. And so let me back up even before that. As a young person growing up in an urban center in Philadelphia, policing was pretty tough. You were taught that, you fear the police, don't look the wrong way, don't sass, don't do certain things, and you'll be okay. But if you do certain other things, you're going to have a problem. So for those who, so I am not one who sits here and tries to tell you that it's been, we've been, oftentimes my former boss, Commissioner Ramsey, said we were on the wrong side of the law longer than we were on the right side of the law. And so I think many of you understand what that means. And so that would come into the police department. When I joined the police department, it was a law and order a kind of process. It was, but, and in the academy, I often share with Jessica when I speak at our classes at the college, and, I came into policing, I was given a pair of handcuffs, a baton, and told to go out and arrest people. No one told me about any of those other issues. It was not my job to deal with those other issues. My job was to arrest. And that's how it was. However, over the next 3 decades in policing, things would really start to change, right? We would start to make some attempts.
You're muted.
Did I mute? Something went back on mute? I was talking for a minute, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what happened. It looked like something popped on my screen and muted me, but it's okay. We're back. So I think I'll pick up again where I may have. I'm not sure where I stopped at, but as I indicated, I've been in the policing for 3 decades. But one of the things over those 3 decades, policing would start to evolve. Community policing would be a big process for us about community policing and being more involved in community policing. And with that become problem solving. But one of the big components of policing would be being data driven. Kathy, earlier you talked about as a professor, we would become data driven, right? We would use data, focus deterrence, and use the data to drive us into where we would deploy our men and women. For the first time, we're going to, not to put our finger up in the air. We're not going to work off of anecdotes. We're going to use, crime data, and those things, but that came at a cost. Because as anyone knows, back when I came in as a deputy in 2009, the charge was to reduce homicides and shootings in the city of Philadelphia by 35%. I think everyone who's in Philadelphia right away is going to tell me, where am I going in the city of Philadelphia? I'm going to my more impoverished communities, and particularly most of my communities of color. And so oftentimes that surge in using data, though we at the time thought that was effective policing, numbers are coming down, but at the same time is also putting a lot of pressure on our communities and putting a lot of those collateral consequences of that type of deployment. It comes at a cost. So, the challenge oftentimes is there are folks who believe that is effective policing. For far too long, the measure of a police department was where your homicide numbers are down or whether your shooting numbers are down. If they're down, then you're doing well. If they're up, then clearly you're not doing effective policing. I submit to you to that question that the most effective policing I've found in my career so far has been community policing. And I'll say that, slow it down a little bit. It's community policing, not the policing, the community. And I think that's what oftentimes we lose focus of. The power of policing comes from the community. Our power to take someone's freedoms and their liberties come from the power we are invested us by the people. And all too often, we find that disconnect when we feel like we're going to come in and police the community without engaging the community in that process. And so a process where community policing is engaged, where you're sitting down and collaborating with the community, where you're understanding the trauma that impacts those communities and the issues in those communities, and where you're working on a very micro level to solve not just the issue of the time, but the long-term issues are key, is what I've found to probably been the most effective policing. And doing that, we get to the issues that Mark has raised around understanding that when I lock him up and arrest him, the sheer consequences that he will engage in. So as a result, we create diversion programs and we do other things to ensure that he has not saddled with those, an arrest where he's not have to deal with those fees. And so I won't spend long because I know we have a long session, but that's where I see the most effective policing is community policing, but it has to be done in a very thoughtful and a very strategic way.
Thank you so much for that. Let me turn to you, Malik, see if you can bring it all together for us. No pressure. You've been working on policy advocacy and litigation to reform the juvenile justice system. But before we get into the reforms, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the system, who's in the system, in the juvenile justice system, especially in Pennsylvania, and what are some of the challenges that young people in the system are currently facing?
Thank you for that question, Jessica, and thank you everyone for having me. Hope everybody can hear me okay. So just to reiterate what Jessica said at the beginning, I think the juvenile justice system was created to be rehabilitative, and it's built on the foundation that children are different from adults in very distinct ways. The brain science has kind of indicated the differences, and the Supreme Court has in fact recognized that youth are subject to kind of what they term transient immaturity. They're subject to impulsive behavior. They're susceptible to peer influence, and they also have a greater capacity to rehabilitate. So I think, foundational to that is that children deserve second chances. So I think that's kind of the foundation of our kind of juvenile justice system. So in a general sense, in terms of demographics and things, the juvenile justice system is composed of, at least in Pennsylvania, composed of children as young as 10. That's kind of the minimum age for juvenile court jurisdiction, and up to 18. It's primarily made up of males. Many of the youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system have also had cases in the dependency system. So there's maybe a little bit of difficult background in terms of their home life. Many have special education eligibility, suffer from disabilities, or have a mental health diagnosis. One thing that I wanted to raise, and which came up from one of the previous speakers, was that children can also be transferred to the adult system. So there are a lot of children who aren't even who aren't even being treated within the juvenile justice system, but they're being transferred to the adult system and being treated like adults, even though they're still children. And one of the most disparaging aspects of our juvenile justice system is that it is filled with racial disparities at every stage of the system. So compared to white youth, Black and Latinx youth are more likely to be arrested. They're less likely to receive pretrial diversion opportunities that would help them stay away from being sent to placements, and that would curb their cases at the beginning. Black and Latinx youth are less likely to receive probation. They are more likely to be sent to placement, and they spend a longer amount of time in placement. All of this compared to white youth. So these racial disparities are really disparaging, and they're really a black mark on our system. And for that reason, the system is not functioning as it should be. In terms of some of the problems that our youth face, one of the biggest issues in Pennsylvania is that we prioritize out-of-home placements. So kind of the first option for that judges and juvenile probation officers use for a lot of youth is to send them to out-of-home placements instead of trying to serve them within their community and using more effective measures. So in 2019, Pennsylvania's total juvenile delinquency expenditure was close to $350 million. And about 80% of that was spent on private and state-run out-of-home placements. So 80% of our expenditure was to send youth away, and only 20% was spent on in-home services that would have allowed youth to remain in their communities. Another issue is that many youth are incarcerated for low-level offenses, as was mentioned before, for things like non-payment of a citation or a fine is something that can land youth in jail. And then a lot of youth are incarcerated for technical probation violations. So if somebody's on probation, there are usually a lot of restrictions that they have to abide by for things such as like curfew and having to do like community service and different things. So if a youth misses their curfew, that's something that they could potentially be sent to placement for, kind of a simple violation. Another issue is that when youth are placed, a lot of these placements are in places and locations that are far away from where the youth live. So the youth are separated from their families and their support systems, and they feel and they can feel very, very, very isolated as a result. And while youth are in these facilities, many youth experience psychological, physical, and also emotional abuse. Youth are they can be placed in solitary confinement. And another big issue is that youth in facilities do not receive adequate educational services. So a lot of them are spending time in these placements. They're not really receiving the treatment that they need, and they're not receiving the educational services that they need. So upon release, they're coming out and they didn't receive educational credit. So a lot of them get disparaged from wanting to go back to school because they've pretty much may have wasted a year or maybe 2 years or even longer and didn't receive adequate educational services that'll transfer to their school so they can finish their schooling. There's also a big issue with the lack of quality legal representation for a lot of youth. When youth are in court, they, through no fault of their attorneys, they're usually being represented by public defenders, and public defenders' offices notoriously have extremely high caseloads, and they don't have enough attorneys or funding to hire enough attorneys. So a lot of attorneys don't really have the time or the capabilities to adequately represent their clients and to really dig into the facts of the case. And so sometimes that results in youth, kind of being talked into taking pleas and things like that. So they're not really receiving the representation that they would ideally deserve. So those are kind of some of the issues that a lot of the youth in our juvenile justice system are facing.
Thanks, Malik. I think folks can probably hear from these presentations about where we are now that there are a lot of problems, and the problems are very serious, and they're affecting young people in ways that last for a lifetime. We are going to go deeper into problems, but eventually also move toward what do we do, because there really are a lot of opportunities for reform right now. So with that, I want to turn to, we sort of have the lay of the land of what the justice system looks like. And let's talk about what's happening right now during this pandemic, and what the experience, how the pandemic is shaping the experiences of young people in the system. So Marcus, let me start with you, and wondering if you can just share a little bit about what it feels like to be a young person who's locked up, and then what you think some additional challenges might be for young people who are locked up during a pandemic. And then if you want to, you raise the issue of fines and fees. So I'm giving you a 3-part question. The third part would be, are there specific issues we should be thinking about as we consider fines and fees during this time of the pandemic? Did you get all 3 of those?
Yeah. Yes, I did. With the first, so I have a like my nephew. One of my nephew is, well, he was also certified as an adult with a different case that he has, and he's right now being held upstate in like an actual state penitentiary, and he's been there since he was 17. I believe he's 19 now. And what I feel like a lot of people feel like they're on, like when you're, and it's not necessarily just any young person right now being inside of these places, it's like being on death row, because you have this, just the entire, fact that you may feel like you're in a place that's not clean. You're in a place that's notoriously dirty, and there's not enough resources and things to keep people clean, keep the places clean, keep people socially distanced, and, adhere to any of the, things that we, at least have the ability to do when you're outside. And it just like, people feel like, they're waiting to die, in a sense. Like, people don't really care about where they at. A lot of the guards, a lot of the staff members at the, at these placements are getting sick, and people are not coming to work. They're really understaffed, and a lot of people are like, to me, it seems like that should be like the last resort to such an extreme right now, because like if a person didn't do anything that's worth, like, I don't feel like young people do, in a normal sense. Like if somebody did something like murder or something that really is harming somebody, like some type of violent offense, well, I feel like would be the only reason why these type of places should be used, in a sense where like you're putting a person's life completely in danger in these places, because we're in a pandemic and people are literally like, the city of Philadelphia is closing right now. Like how does none of these things seem to be taken to effect with the justice system, and young people are still being assessed fines, although you can't, there's a moratorium on evictions, but there's no moratorium on fines and fees. Like they're still being doled out, in the exact same manner, although the money that a person is using to pay to get their child maybe out of a fine could be money that they might need for medicine or food for an older person that's, really, these things are necessary right now. A lot of people's jobs are closing. A lot of, businesses are closed. A lot of parents are not able to work. And to have these fines still placed in the exact same manner, although like I felt like it's a very good case to say that, these fines were ridiculous before what's going on now. But with everything that's going on now, it just seems to be even more ridiculous that we are still handing out fines. Like they're literally, I've seen in some cases where, if a person is like outside too long, they're getting a fine. And it's like, people can't go outside to work. So like, where's the money supposed to be coming from to pay, these fines that these young people are being assessed? I feel like there has to be something better done with, people who aren't in a position to work. They aren't allowed to work 40 hours a week. They have to go to school by law. Like there shouldn't be, these fees, so like these amounts of money it's impossible for some people to pay. And if a person's family doesn't already have the money, then it's a completely different story. Because if a person's family was rich, then a fine isn't even really it's really not even anything. Like it doesn't affect them at all. Like it doesn't hurt them if a person's family can just pay it off like it's nothing. It only hurts the people who are in poverty, who who are choosing between paying for some food or paying, or paying a bill or paying an electric bill, paying to have a phone on, paying for a trans pass, paying for gas, and paying a fine. So right now, I feel like there's just so much going on that the pandemic should be taken into account before these type of measures are still being taken during what is going on. Like there should be some type of care when it comes to what people what the entire world is going through, as far as not being able to financially support these things that aren't completely necessary.
Thanks for that, Marcus. And for context, there are some places across the country that have put moratoriums on the collection of fines and fees.
Definitely.
Because of the pandemic. And so, sort of as we think about your words, Marcus, one of the things we can start thinking about is what might we do? And is this a moment to take advantage of, sort of bringing bringing under the spotlight some of the practices that never worked and that are even more problematic now. So thanks for queuing that up for us. And sort of in that shift to where do we go from here, Kevin, I'll turn to you. Obviously, COVID has changed day-to-day life for all of us. You may hear, my children eating lunch in the background, which never used to happen on a work day. Is it leading to any new approaches for schools and policing that will be helpful in the long run? And are there things we should be focusing on in this moment so that we can really support positive outcomes for youth who are in the justice system or youth who are entering the justice system?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I think I shared this before, coming from a policing space, I always felt that during these times of crisis is when you really can evaluate your organizations while you're in the middle of a crisis. It is often those times where you can find those areas where you can improve. And it's also those times where you find areas of weakness. I think one of the things that policing is recognizing here, particularly here in even Philadelphia, is the rest of juvenile hours are down, and I think I shared with Jessica, and the world's not coming to an end. And somehow policing is able to continue to function without bringing a disproportionate number of young people into custody to maintain that level of safety that's needed across the city. And so I think there's a great opportunity here now for policing, and pretty much talking about the policing and not in the schools at this point, but just the policing in general, both here locally and nationally, to really take a hard look at where we can now start to find additional ways to stop young people from coming into the system. And I think it shouldn't be, all too often we've talked about this is like a public health emergency, particularly as it relates to juveniles in our system, but it's taken a different kind of public health emergency to bring that attention to bear. And so when all of this is over and we're on the other side of this virus, we should not all of a sudden turn the switch back and say, let's go back to what we used to do. If we've already over the last year realized we've already been forced in some cases that we don't have to have all of our children in custody to help them change their behavior. So I'm hopeful as part of that is that the advocacy from agencies like yours and others will continue to push forward to say we can't go backwards. We can't allow the system to keep going back to where it was when we know that wasn't a good space. And so I think that's important. As I bring that into my space here in the school district, it's a rare opportunity, I've said in my career, where things get to stop and I get to implement change. Here I oversee the school safety for the school district of Philadelphia. We don't have sworn Philadelphia police officers in our schools. We don't have officers who wear guns. We have security officers, school safety officers. But it's a unique opportunity. I took over this position in November of last year under the charge of Dr. Haidt to re-envision the school safety and how we could work with young people in a more humane and dignified way. And so, as a result of the crisis, though unfortunate, has also given me an opportunity, because the kids are not in school, to really work internally to re-envision my department. And so one of the things we have embarked on is a comprehensive strategy of what does that look like, moving away from what was previously a law enforcement centric type of organization, though we weren't policing, We kind of carry that paramilitary style to a department that's now really see as when it was 5, we've created a 5-pillar strategy. I won't talk about all those pillars, but our core pillar coming out is restorative practices, you know, and also looking at that from a trauma-informed lens and a development and a brain development lens, understanding that the young people in our schools and how they manifest themselves, one is because of their brain science, but also because of the trauma that's inflicted on them day by day. And so as a result, we've worked now during this downtime to expand our diversion work. So we were an organization that where we're doing a set number of kids diverted. So just so for history, I created a diversion program in the police department and with the school district and now oversee it, but where we went from a system that used to arrest 1,600 students a year to last year doing 265. But that's not good enough for me. The purpose was to how do we expand that diversion to grab the more young people and so they don't get put into the system and what Marcus eloquently describes and the consequences of that. So we're really working, expanding our diversion in that work. We create a youth court, our own youth court for our school safety officers, so we can move young people to a youth court so they don't, young people and youth voice, as you hear today, is important. And so part of our charge now is letting young people deal with some of the discipline and the issues. And I can tell you, even though we shut down, we started before the virus started. And it's absolutely amazing how young people just asking very basic questions can help change the trajectory of young people's lives. We're working now in partnership with Drexel University and University of Penn to create a program around how police can be safe in the schools and work with the programming in school. There's a program called Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support that's in a number of our schools and which works with the behavior of the kids in different tiers of behavior. But we want to see how we can be a part of that process so that we're working in a restorative way and introducing mentoring during this downtime to train all of our officers on mentoring and creating restorative circles. So we've trained all of our officers to do restorative circles and be advancing that through a 4-phase process so that they'll be actually instituting circles in their schools in lieu of, you know, bringing in law enforcement in lieu of suspensions. And then the biggest key for us is training, and more training. I mean, really focusing in on how we really can train our men and women to really be effective in this space. And the only way we feel like we can do that is we created our own internal training academy now to be able to do, you know, weekly trainings with our men and women, pulling them out of the field, bringing them into the training, re-emphasizing what they're doing. And so we think that collective work is our way. And so when Jessica talks about, you know, our young people going into the system and the juvenile justice system and the kids at risk, I mean, my position is that we really need to slow it down. And for my purposes, when I hear that question, my process is I don't want another Marcus to go into the system, right? And I want to keep young people from not going into the system. You know, policing is the front of the spear. It is that place where we start the process. The majority of the young people who come into the criminal justice system come in by police. If policing does not change, then nothing will change. The disparities will not change. The process will not change. And so as part of our charge is, I feel, in law enforcement, both here in my school and then my colleagues in the law enforcement space and other schools, that we have a responsibility to make some different decisions because right now the system is not working effectively. And so we have a position to do that. I know there was a question came up around restorative circles. I won't call myself probably somebody a better expert on restorative circles on here than me. But what it really involves is creating a circle of youth and most times, some cases, adults in that space where we take a problem that historically has been handled by, say, a suspension, or may have been handled by, even in some cases, potentially an arrest. And we bring a young person into that setting. So our youth court is built that way. Our youth court stands up as a formal court, but if they recognize that, you know, it's better served for us to go into a circle, then we go into a circle, and then we just start to really walk through what are the issues that are going on that brought it to that process, how to solve those issues, but let the young people and the people in the group and the young person be a part of that, sometimes even the person who's been the victim of that, to really sit in that space to almost just liken it to what we're doing now, having a conversation, but working through the problem, coming up with a resolution, holding ourselves accountable for those resolutions, oftentimes works better in those settings because it's not this oppressive, somebody sitting at the top of the bench is not somebody giving orders, is really working collaboratively together to bring about resolution and also bringing equity to the process, right? Because the goal is you want it to be an equitable process. And so baked into that is making sure that it is equitable to all the parties. I probably butchered that, and I know there's some restorative experts on here, but I did the best I can just from my visual process of being and sitting in one panel.
Thank you. And I think a lot restorative justice and a lot of the other reforms that you're talking about are sort of based in the notion of looking for not only at weaknesses, but looking at strengths and building relationships rather than severing relationships. I think your diversion program is another example. Positive behavioral interventions and supports is another one. And so just sort of broadly speaking, a lot of the shifts in thinking that look really promising are helping young people to develop strengths.
Yeah, and I'll share, this is not weakness. I tell people it's, sometimes it's seen as this weakness. And I've told people I was a cop for 30 years, and I've done some, I've done some of the hardest policing you've ever seen, and some of the softest. It takes courage for us to recognize that we're wrong. It takes courage just for have empathy. It takes courage for us to understand that young people are built differently, and we built this system on consequences, as Jessica knows. Everything's got to be a consequences, not realizing actually what those consequences are. When I hear Marcus sitting there saying almost 13 years later, he's dealing with an incident from being 16, it drives me crazy. That something is demonstrably wrong with our system. And so it's going to take courage for all of us to step up and say, okay, I'm a big bad cop, but I also believe that we shouldn't be locking up children for all of these minor offenses in which normal adolescent development. I'm gonna shut up, Jess, because you're not gonna start talking.
Thanks so much for that. I see a question about what we can do, and we are definitely planning to get to that question more broadly in a few minutes. So I'll hold that one for now. But Malik, I want to turn to you on this question about reforms and what's happening right now. Some of the work you're doing is on state level reforms. What's underway? Excuse me. Are you seeing any changes in the work as a result of the pandemic?
Thank you for that question, Jessica. Yeah, there has been a lot of change as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic. I think one of the biggest things that has come out of this pandemic is that there's a heightened sensitivity to issues related to confinement and incarceration. I think more broadly, there has been a change from a lot of organizations who were advocating for improvement of conditions inside facilities. I think there has been a little bit of a shift to, instead of trying to improve the conditions within facilities, to just remove youth from those facilities. I think that kind of remains key to saving youth from this pandemic, because COVID-19, if a juvenile probation officer or one of the staff at one of these facilities has COVID-19, the youth are stuck there. It could be transmitted to one of the youth, and then it can run rampant throughout youth placements. And so I think, the best solution is just to remove them. One other thing that I have seen is that there has been a lot of unity among advocates and others involved within the juvenile justice system. I think with this pandemic, one of the things that it brought was just an understanding that, look, we're all on the same team here. These youth are being negatively impacted by this disease. And so we all need to work together to try to bring the youth home. So that was one of the positive things that kind of came out. We've seen a lot of rallying around from different advocacy organizations. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they have directed judges to consider the COVID-19 public health crisis when making their decisions. So it's something that they're kind of telling judges to keep in mind in terms of when judges are making decisions about whether to place youth and things like that, diversionary programs and things like that. So I think that's something that's very important. That has come out of this. We've also, as an organization, have been very active with the Juvenile Justice Task Force, which is Governor Wolf appointed about 20 to 30 stakeholders, of which our esteemed panelist, Kevin Bethel, is a member of stakeholders within the juvenile justice system to come together. It has legislators, people who work for Department of Human Services, and people who work for defenders organizations and district attorneys and individuals who are all involved with the juvenile justice system to come together to kind of work on reforms to the juvenile justice system. So they have been, as a separate body, the Juvenile Justice Task Force has kind of been discussing these issues. Some of the things that we have been pushing for specifically is that we obviously want to reduce the amount of youth that are currently in the system. So we have been calling for the release of youth who are currently in juvenile placement to bring them home. We have been calling for kind of raising the age for minimum juvenile justice jurisdiction so that so that less youth are brought into the system. We have been also calling for, excuse me, sorry. So we have been calling for a limit to the circumstances for which youth can be committed and also detained. We have been calling for the elimination of placements due to poverty for things like fines and fees. So those are some of the reforms that we have been pushing for.
And I think it's safe to say that the juvenile justice field has changed even over the last 5 or 10 years. So this conversation that Malik is describing about really young people belong in their homes and we need to dramatically limit the number of young people who face placement is one that's happening across the state here with many of our advocates, many stakeholders in the system agree. It's also happening across the country. And we have seen really dramatic reductions in the number of young people who are incarcerated since that court order that Malik mentioned. I think around that time we had about 2,000 young people in placement, which could be pre-trial or it could be post-adjudication placement. And now we have about 1,500. So we've seen about a 25% reduction in the number of young people in placement. So when Kevin talked about kind of holding on to the reforms and not just going back to business as usual, that's the kind of thing we'd like to see. In Maryland, they had even more dramatic reductions. Their court order was a little more, had more teeth to it. It was a little bit more binding and pushed the lower courts a little harder. And I don't have the exact percentages, but they saw hundreds and hundreds of youth immediately released from incarceration. So there is a moment here to capture something good that is happening in the midst of all of the challenges and to hold on to it. We have a slew of questions from folks on the Zoom meeting, but I also have one more kind of broad question I want to put to each of you, which is really based on this work that's come out of the Black Lives Matter movement to push for a defunding of the police. And I'm wondering if you can just talk about this conversation that's really about dramatically changing our approach to policing and shifting resources to community-based organization, to social work, to mental health services, to other approaches. I think you've all touched on this a little bit already in describing your work and what you've seen happening. But if you could kind of pick up where we left off in that conversation, how do you take this defund the police conversation? Where do we go from here? And I'll open that up to each of you. Well, Mr. Bethel, you're as the police representative. I'll start with you.
I want to wait till the third. And so I often tell, I take the statement to mean folks want a different type of policing, and I don't necessarily correlate to having to take funds from policing to accomplish that goal. I think you can have both. Right. I mean, the reality is, and I've often said this, there's almost 240 million calls to 911 a year in the nation. 240 million times across the nation, people call 911 for police services. Of that, even in the city of Philadelphia, I know not everyone's from Philadelphia, but in Philadelphia, it's 2.5 million times people call into the 911 system for services. So clearly there is something about the 911 system that people want, or it has been baked into our culture and into how we operate. And even when you look at the surveys, RAND surveys, and I think even Pew and others, the majority of the nation does not agree, particularly with the term of defunding or reducing the policing. But I think all of my colleagues in law enforcement, and it's something we've been talking about years, recognize that something has to change. For too long, we've been asked to do too much. You know, when we closed many of our mental health facilities and we put many of our mental health folks who are suffering mental health out on the street, you know, we said, policing, we want you to deal with that. We're going to train our men and women on crisis intervention, and we're going to give them a taser, and we're asking you to handle that. When we see many of our individuals out on the street in homelessness, we said, hey, we want the police department. So all too often, those social ills that have impacted our communities have been asked policing to step in and take on those charges, as they have reduced their budgets and shifted their money to other things. You know, and so I think when we look at this conversation around the funding, I really think we have to take a really hard stop and really ask, what do we really want to accomplish here? I mean, what is our ultimate goal? I mean, what is the outcomes we want, and really focus on, because it's not just about policing. I mean, I think Malik and Marcus eloquently described, it's a system, right? I mean, policing is responding to many of those constructs that are built into, hey, you know what, I can pull over and give you a big book of the crimes codes with countless offenses in there that they say, hey, that the police department or policing is responsible for. And so I think we have a really opportunity here now, as was talked in the beginning, to really take a hard step back and really figure out, how do we want to handle this? Because if we're just going to say we want more social workers, or we want more mental health workers in the policing, and those who are in that space know that someone with a PhD is not going to walk up with somebody in crisis with a knife or a gun. I mean, so is that realistic when we make those statements, or do we have a responsibility to follow through to see what that really looks like? I mean, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of capacity out in our communities. It's just whether individuals for the first time want to take a forward position and say, in lieu of calling 911, I'm going to call the mental health catchment center, and the mental health catchment center is going to deploy to that location, versus the way it is now, where I'm asked to bring that person into custody and arrest them and physically bring them to the catchment center. There's a role reversal there that doesn't cost any money. It just requires a change in thought process and a change in culture of how we respond. I know there's a number of agencies starting to experiment now. I think SEPTA recently has brought on someone with a mental health background to walk along with their police officers. And so it'd be a process now to see what that looks like. But I think we have to get away from, you know, I know the slogan really captures this energy, but I don't think it really, because if I take you into some of my more challenging communities and you walk in and you tell those folks in the community that I'm going to take the police out, they will fight you tooth and nail. I think the conversation really has to be a more comprehensive and thoughtful process about what does it look like. So if you're going to take $25 million from this organization, then what does that go to? What does that look like? What are the outcomes of that? What are the expectations of that? What do we want from that? And I think that more comprehensive process could then begin to build how we can do that. And so that's my position on it. I don't take it as offensive. Some of my colleagues take that as offensive, to fund the police. Policing is going to be here until the end of time. That is just that's the reality. But again, it goes back to my earlier conversation. The power of policing comes from the community and the citizenry. If they want to make a different choice, they will, but we have to figure out what that difference is and where do we want to do that as we move forward in policing.
Thank you for that. I see a comment here that the term is unfortunate, but not meant literally. And I think what I've seen is sort of a range of opinions on what that term means, from a very literal, let's take money out and put it into other social services, to really the kind of reforms that you're describing now, which is And another point that the purchase of military equipment seems inappropriate for local
But
police.
can I
You
speak
wanna
to that?
respond to that one? Yeah.
What I would caution folks to say in the early 90s after 9/11, the police department for the first time was required to the Homeland Security Response Group. That we were no longer, so coming through my policing days in the early 80s, I wasn't worried about bombings or even a non-aware or a terrorist attack. That never even was in my training. But policing would then evolve where it became a part of policing across the nation, building of the Homeland Security agencies, that policing would now take on that charge. And so part of that came with it, the ability to respond to bombings and having the ability to respond to those type of events. I would say to you that even in those cases where we have a barricade situation, that Bearcat that you see in that big black truck coming down the street is a necessary tool for policing. Or if we were all in a room today and people had guns on us taking down the wall, that truck could do that for us. But what it does not mean to use those in the way they've been used in Ferguson and other places as against our community. Those types of devices should be always kept away from our community unless they were needed for a specific event, not for protests. They were not meant for that. Not to use in a way to be spraying, tear gas out of the top of the turret. That's not what it was used for. And what has gotten us in trouble is how we've used that equipment. But the reality, it has become a necessary tool in the policing toolbox as a result of all of these layers of, again, back to my earlier conversation of things that have happened in policing that they now ask us to take care of. But it's our failure to really regulate what we do, how we do it, and where we use that equipment has caused us to go down this path of why do you have military vehicles? If we explain it in a proper way, use it in a proper way, most of you will never ever see that equipment. But when we decide we're going to run through a protest with it, it what really caused that to be a very big problem for us.
Thank you for that. And Marcus and Malik, let me turn this question to either one of you. And I, know this is an area where there's a lot of thinking going on, a lot of exploration right now. We may have different perspectives on it that will only make the conversation richer. So Marcus, are you ready to go next? And then I'll turn to Malik after that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great.
Personally, I actually am not like the biggest fan of the term defund the police because it just doesn't seem realistic. I would rather like repurpose the police, like retrain, like it's really like hold the police accountable. Like the problem I feel like a lot of communities have, or me personally feeling like police aren't held to the same standards that everybody else is, and not giving them money is not going to change that. I personally don't feel like they paid enough to begin with, which is going to lead a person to be not like, I feel like that job that they have, they don't get paid enough in the first place, which leads people to be the way, maybe not be, more stressed out, more likely to, they have a lot of things so it's more so I feel like there needs to be more people hired, more mental health professionals. There needs to be more places that provide opportunities that a police officer could take someone to, as opposed to a prison. Like a prison should not be the only place that you can take somebody, and that's pretty much all that we have is prisons, and we just build more and more prisons, especially for juveniles. It's like we just built, as opposed to building that prison that they just built on 46 in Haverford. Like that could have been anything else. That imagine that building being built in a more positive manner to serve young people, or a building of that magnitude, of that budget, of how much it was. But the budget only seems to go to arresting people. So it's like when people want to defund the police, it's just because it seems like that's the only place that the budget goes is to lock kids up. And it's like in terms of, it doesn't, like, even when you do the math on how much money is spent on trying to recoup, like to take money away from a person, to get fines back from kids. Like there's a lot of money that's misspent within these budgets. And it's really like taking a serious look at where the money can be spent better. Like, the money isn't effective in, you know, the ways that we're currently using it, because there's a lot of, you know, disdain along both sides. There's a lot of people who feel like there's, you know, something should be done differently. I feel like my kids are really loud downstairs. I'm sorry if you can hear them having a time of their life. but,
That's all good, Marcus.
but just I really just feel like a lot of people don't really like the cops don't. I don't think that the cops should not have, like, shouldn't exist or shouldn't have a job. It's just that we shouldn't need them as much. Like, we don't need them as much. Like, every problem is not, like, that's not the answer to it. It's like having a multiple choice question, and for every answer you're saying cops, arrest them. Every problem that comes up, everything a young person does, it's like every single answer is not, it shouldn't be the police. It shouldn't have to always be arrest someone. And that's like the part, it's just like use the police less. Like, it's not necessarily even defunding. Like, that is in a sense defunding them, because you would be giving people less hours, but it just use the police less to where as though they're not being, you know, overexerted on a community that needs more than that. Like, they need financial services. Like, if a person, a big thing to me, like, if a person doesn't have resources, then they can't, you know, give resources. Like, if a person has more programs and places that they know that are giving things out to the community, and they could say, you know, you standing here on the corner selling drugs, I could, you know, it's a job over here that I have. If they had jobs or different things that they could give people, as opposed to arrest, there are other things that you can give a person than a pair of handcuffs. And that's all that the police have to work with. So that's all they're going to use. That's the only tool that they have. So it's like giving people more tools than what they have. And that's in a sense, in a place of physical places to go, and things like actual resources that you can give people. Like, there's things that, you know, an expungement card, like there's like, the police don't, I'm pretty sure, like, that's just a simple thing like a police officer could be helping a person with, in terms of, like, you've been arrested. Okay, I know I had a case with you, the same way you showed up in court for this young person to get a case. You could show up and, you know, help them get an expungement when they turn 19 and they don't have any you know, record. Like, these are the type of things that I feel like are lost, in a sense of, okay, you arrest the person one time, and then, like, that's your only job, that's the only interaction you have with a person, or you show up to court to put them in there. I feel like there should be more personality in, you know, policing, because that's what leads, I feel like, to the community. Like, the only time you see police is like when they're like playing basketball or dancing. Like, there should be more positive interactions with police in the community than that. Like, real community, like real communications and real exchanges of, you know, positive things. And, you know, there's opportunity for that, but I just don't see it in, you know, in practice. So that's just a thing I would like to see more of. And I'm like, just more than, you know, just defunding the police, it's like making the police better. And since, like, it's not just like taking, because like Kevin said, the police aren't going to go anywhere. Like, we're always going to have a need for, you know, that service, but it's more so about, they shouldn't only be able, like, that the only thing that they are trained to do is arrest people. There should be more than, that they can offer the community than a pair of handcuffs.
I'm going to steal your multiple questions. I'm going to steal a multiple question example. That was a great one.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Thanks for that, Marcus. I heard a couple of key points there. One is really thinking about when we need the police and when we need other resources, and making sure we have those other resources in place. One was about sort of how the police interact with the community and building those community relationships in meaningful ways. And I see there's a chat box entry about some examples of how that might be done. And then the third one is that it's not just about the police, and both of you have mentioned, it's kind of, we have a broader issue. If we're trying to transform the justice system, we need to be thinking more holistically about the system. So Malik, with that, let me turn it over to you to pick up on either the initial question or sort of where this conversation is leading, and what your thoughts are on defunding or restructuring our justice system.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I would kind of agree with both Marcus and Kevin. I think there's an interesting choice of words here because I think the main thing for me is that we need to transform how policing is done. So I think there just needs to be an overall shift away from arresting and incarcerating to serving youth within the community and identifying what the needs are. There are so many instances where police are notified of an incident, maybe, you know, somebody stole a candy bar or something like that. And I just think that there's kind of a culture where we have to arrest and then we need to incarcerate this person instead of maybe just trying to figure out what the root causes are. And I think through an increase in like social services, mental health services, and community-based organizations, things like mentorship programs and just other alternatives to incarceration, I think they will prove much more effective than just arresting and incarcerating youth. So I think police are still always going to be necessary. We still need them for public safety. I just think that the response, once police arrive at the scene and once police are engaged, I think there should just be a shift within that. So I don't want to kind of piggyback too much off of what Marcus and Kevin said, but I think there just needs to be a shift away from the incarceration model.
Thank you for that. I'm trying to figure out how much more we can get in the time that we have, but one question that has come up, I think, from a number of people is what community members can do, even if they don't work in this field, to help support justice reform, to help support police reform. Specifically, are there, what role might groups like the League of Women Voters and NAACP play? What role might individual citizens play? Someone asked what role is there for older community members? So just to make sure we get to that one, which I think is really the key here, I'll ask that one first. And if we have more time, we'll get to some of the other questions that have been chatted in. So I'll throw that out to whoever wants to start. What can the community do to support these reforms that we're all talking about?
Personally, I would say being like being in the know, like when you know what's going on, or just being like a better, like more informed. Like you can't help anybody if you don't know something. Like just a real simple example, like just in the child welfare system, there's 4 kids. I grew up with 4 of us in the house. You can get an apartment when you turn 18. Now, I had 2, a worker who didn't. My older 2 brothers, social worker never told them about this program, so they never got an apartment. My sister's social worker told her about the program, so she got an apartment. I found out because my sister got it, and I wouldn't have got an apartment. So just by her, somebody telling you about a program that you're, accessible to, change the trajectory of, I feel like, my life, because I was able to get an apartment when I was 18, and if I wasn't able to get my own house, I might have had a completely different life, staying in other people's couches and doing all of this. And it's just really that simple in terms of like knowing like what's going on, to be able to give people that information. And a lot of times you might not think you have like that you can help somebody, but it's really just like knowing what's going on to be able to help somebody when these things do come up, because you never know when you can help somebody, or the information that you've already found out is like gonna be like everything to somebody. And that's just really like the programs and there's a lot of programs and things that people maybe have access to that they don't know about. And I feel like when people are in position to bridge those 2 things, and sometimes aren't able to or don't know how to, I feel like when you just more into finding out what's going on, you're more able to help people, because you kind of know, okay, well, this program is going on for people that was in the child welfare system, or people who was locked up before. There might be this resource, and you can give that to somebody else, and it's really like nothing that you physically had to do, but there's so much that you can do. And it just being like standing in the middle for people who aren't able to get to either side of whatever problem that it is. You can help a lot of people without having to physically do anything, by just being a bridge for other people with information and resources. I feel like that's like I try to do that type of stuff for like all the younger people in my family. If I have a positive experience with something, or I know, or I get something from somewhere, or some type of program, I'm a big advocate for that, and I try to give everybody else that I know that's eligible for that type of stuff the same information to help them pass it along, and just to keep certain things going along. Like the AIC Center is where they help. Like, this is where I found that's where I got the job for JLC at, and that was a resource that was to kids in DHS. So anybody that I know in DHS, I always refer them to the AIC Center because I've gotten something positive out of it. And it's just things of that nature. And that's a place that I would say that if a person is in, DHS or in some type of, like, that's one of those programs that, if a person is in that place and you give them that program, it could possibly change their life just by you referring them somewhere.
For me, we keep going. I mean, for me, I often tell the community members that I would meet, even in my prior position, really just do your research. Like, what is your passion? I mean, I think all too often, we want to do it all, and so when you look up, you're like, I'm doing nothing because it's just too much, right? And so part of it is really where do you want to put your focus at, and doing your research to say, hey, if I want to be in fines and fees, and I want to be, I'm the Juvenile Law Center, right? I mean, I'm not saying it because Jessica is here, but because my work led to their work, and I found them as I was going down my path that was uncharted at the time. But I don't have to go to, so when I'm looking for young people to come talk, and Marcus, we've been on a panel together, if I need young people to tell me about their life experience, I go to Jessica and her team, and they provide me with those young people. If I have something that I need when it related to the report they put out, the debtor's prison, that kind of stuff. So there are entities that if you see that, really do your research, because there's a lot of folks out there who are not doing good by our kids. I'll be the first one to tell you too. There are a lot of organizations that are they say they're representing our kids, but I always look at the budget, right? What are you doing with our young people? I mean, what are you doing? I mean, and when you do that, you can find that you can put yourself in a place where, I know the Juvenile Law Center, Education Law Center, all these areas are always looking not just for funding, but they need physical support and bodies when they put out that call that we need you at this place. It's important to them. And then I also look at these larger organizations, like even the League of Women Voters, and say, but you also have some ability to build capacity. All too often, we have a lot of our folks in the community who don't know how to organize. They don't have the connectivity to those to get their voice being told. So when you have this panel today, you elevate that into a much larger process. Well, a lot of our community members don't have that capacity to organize, don't know anything about Zoom, and don't know anything about how to put a meeting together, or really how to construct a positive, get that groundswell going. And so I often tell my larger organizations that sometimes you got to reach down and grab those folks and help them, teach them what is it? What does it mean to lead? What does it mean to run an organization? What does it mean to get a platform for your message? And so I think that's where organizations like the League is doing today, and others can really step in and amplify those voices, because many of these young people are marginalized and they don't have a voice. And so, elevating their voices, is such a positive process. And in doing so, you really can change the dynamics, because I think oftentimes we lose track of, it's somebody else's child. And I often tell you, man, when you think through the lens of what would you want with your child? If Marcus was telling that story today and he was your child, what would you do? You'd probably be all angry and upset and can't believe that Lackawanna County is still chasing for fines. We have to take that kind of charge into our hearts and our minds and say, this is what we can do. So.
Thank you for that. Malik, I'll turn it over to you for the same question.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I would just concur with all the previous panelists' ideas. I think one of the biggest things that people can do, I think, is just to become educated, kind of like you all are doing now. So I think it's important, one, that people kind of understand the issues and understand what youth are experiencing within the juvenile justice system, and also within the Black Lives Matter movement, and also during the pandemic. So I think the more armed they are with accurate knowledge about what's going on, the more able they'll be to help in terms of like specific things to do, to kind of get involved. once you kind of are armed with knowledge about what's going on, one of the biggest things is to reach out to your local and also your state legislators to kind of ask for change. So you can advocate and ask that your legislators support reform to help bring youth home and also to help curb their entrance into the juvenile justice system. I also think now there's a great opportunity with the Pennsylvania Juvenile Justice Task Force that is currently going. They have meetings twice a month. They're currently going to be going into a subgroup phase where they're going to be meeting privately, but back in January, they're going to come back. So that's a great opportunity to kind of start tuning into the meetings and to kind of get involved, to kind of see what's going on and what potential reforms are going to be discussed, and then to reach out to your state legislators to ask them to implement some of those changes and to continue doing that. One of the biggest things is also mentorship. There are a bunch of community organizations and programs like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, a bunch of Boys and Girls Clubs, other organizations through which you can get involved to mentor youth to, ensure that they're on the right track and to kind of make a difference that way.
There we go. Thanks for that. Malik, actually, one follow-up question on that is: Do you have a sense of the task? Well, actually, this is for either Malik or Kevin. Do you have a sense of the task force timeline? So, if people are interested in getting more involved in juvenile justice policy advocacy, I'll share the link for the task force itself. What are the timelines for change that we're looking to? Oh, look, Kathy already shared it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the link will lay out. I think it carries us, and Malik probably knows any better than me, even though I'm on the task force, I get distracted a little bit. Carries us into early March of next year, I believe. So there's time. The website will show you when the meetings are. It also will show you all the historical meetings that have occurred and the PowerPoints. And I think it's really important earlier to Malik's point about educating yourself. Take a look at the information on the website. I mean, one thing that was shocking to me, that realized that a large majority of the kids in custody today are for misdemeanors offenses with no priors. And I was like utterly shocked to hear that, and saying, well, so these are kids who have done non-violent offenses, who are in placement, and they've never even had a prior offense. If that doesn't shock folks and say something's wrong with the system, then there's a problem. And so to Malik's earlier point, I would encourage you to take a look at the website, go through the slides. There's some really good information that Pew is supporting this initiative, and the notes, and you can really start to dive in. And because I think at the end of each session, we have an open session where folks are allowed to come in and speak their mind. And I think the more people who get engaged, the better this process will be.
Thank you for that. So to our hosts, I'm looking at you. We could do one or two more. We had some sort of targeted questions about juvenile interrogation and education in the system. I feel like we're at a nice, tie the bow moment. Do you all have preferences? All right, well, let's we'll use our last 5 minutes to just see if we can answer a couple of the questions that have been thrown out. One of them was just what happens in Pennsylvania around interrogation for young people.
Yeah, my position, well, first and foremost, in Pennsylvania, youth are afforded the Miranda rights, the right to an attorney, and to be questioned as an adult. The only difference we do, and it's not even a requirement, but many of the jurisdictions across the state require that a parent be in with a student, with a youth. But I think what we have learned, and Jessica will tell you, that oftentimes, though we say parent, that does not mean that they are informed. That does not mean that they're an advocate for that youth. So just because you have a parent in the room doesn't mean that they're not going to waive the rights of that child. Some work we've done recently, I'm worked with on the monitoring team in Baltimore around their federal consent decree. And so one of the things I feel is that, in that case, we were able to put forth a policy that every child 15 and under has to have an attorney and a parent, adult in the room with them to waive Mirandas and be represented. a child over 16 and over is also afforded an attorney, but is not mandated, and having a parent. I think that's starting to move the stick a little bit, but Jessica can tell you more than I that historically, even the Supreme Court has recognized the development approach and the adolescent brain and the impact that has on these interviews. And we have enough evidence now to show that many of these cases get turned over as a result of that. And so we have to be more thoughtful. I always look at it to the lens when somebody challenged me about why are you pushed to have an attorney in the room with a child. I said, if you grab my 16-year-old daughter today and you took her and you put her into custody, I want my daughter, I've told my daughter she is to talk to no one and she will have an attorney. I want for all our kids what we would want for our own kids, that they would not be in an interrogation talking to anyone unless their parent is giving approval or having representation. And I don't think that's a heavy stick to bear, because if you have good evidence, if you're doing your case properly, whether you have a statement or not, that should not make or break your case. And so I feel strongly that, you should be represented in that space, but good representation. And I think when we as part earlier, we're talking about educating yourself, just having a parent in the room does not mean that we're protecting that child. Because many of the times our parents will come into that space, sometimes even frustrated and not really looking through the clear lens of the downstream impacts that an investigation could have. So it's important that they're educated and that you have an adult in that space who understands the system and understands what they're waiving when they do that.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from our league members and friends? Well, I want to thank our presenters, Jessica, Malik, Kevin, and Marcus, for an excellent presentation. It's been enlightening for us. Your multifaceted approach utilizing advocacy, policy reform, education, training, communication is truly a model for us in the league. It's very encouraging to hear about your new reforms, restorative justice approaches, diversion programs, youth courts, mentoring, increased training, shifts to social and mental health services, and collaborative circles as a template for positive change. This is a very uplifting for us with all the negativity out there in the press. It's wonderful to hear these kinds of visionary approaches. We commend you for all the important work you do, and we greatly appreciate you educating us today. So I would really enjoy and ask everybody to unmute themselves just for a minute so we can give a really great hand of applause to this wonderful panel and to Jessica and for putting together such a great station.
Thank you all so much. It was really a pleasure.
And I also just wanted to take a minute to just go over a few things about what we have coming up to entice our league members and our new friends to come join us. We would encourage you to become members of the league. We need your advocacy and your energy to contribute to our organization. If you are a member of the league, we thank you for your support, but if you're not a member, we really encourage you to join, and you can join on LWV-CDC.org. We hope you can join us for our upcoming programs. We have a virtual holiday gathering on a Saturday, December 5th at 11 o'clock. And we have the opportunity to hear Dr. Monica Taylor, who's the vice chair of the Delaware County Council, to educate us on what's happening with the public health department in Delaware County. And this obviously ties into all the mental health needs that we heard today. We also have a hot topic program again on justice, and it's going to be on prisons, voting of the incarcerated, and reforms at George Hill, which is our Delaware County jail. We plan on inviting Kevin Madden, who is the county council member, and along with a representative of the Prison Oversight Board. Please stay tuned for more information to follow and check out our website. And for further information on all our programming, please check our calendar of events. So I want to thank you all for being here today with us, and we've truly appreciated the great conversation we've had today. And also I'd like to make one further shout out to the Civic Education Committee, who has done such a wonderful job in putting this together and working on the content development with the Juvenile Law Center. Thank you all. If anybody would like to share their feedback or comments for just a few more moments before we leave the Zoom, please do so. I would love to hear from you and hear any comments or thoughts that you have about what kinds of actions that you personally may take after you've been educated by these visionary folks.
I really appreciate that we were all educated in so many fine points that at least I wasn't aware of. And I am definitely going to contact the fees and whatever for juvenile justice for the shift fund. It pays off the fines and fees for younger people that would have this as a debt. That's one thing I can do anyway. I really appreciate everything I've learned. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Anybody else would like to share any thoughts or comments of what resonated with them about what we can do as a league to, now that we're more educated about what the needs are and where the reforms are located in the future?
No, I just wanted to give you a little bit of tip about my mom, you know, when she was younger, and we lived in the projects, and she would get all the ladies together, make dinners and sell them, and everyone would pay their rent and feed their kids. Mm-hmm. I said, we've kind of like separated a little bit now, and things are a little more iffy. Should I talk to them or shouldn't? I said, but communities need to get back together too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is true.
Oh, hi, Varma.
Hi. You know, Kevin talked about community policing, and that resonates with me because I remember the days when the churches in the community were involved. If a youth got into trouble, the priest or the ministers or a faith-based person would be involved in helping to mentor this young person and help rather than calling the police and saying, arrest them, you know, for stealing a candy bar. So they would get a lecture and they would get support and they would get counseling from community-based organizations. And I wish that we would go back to those days when the community was involved in helping to mentor and guide our youths who are acting as teenagers do. Just being caught up and thrown into prison is not really changing behavior or changing lives. It's a punishment, but how do you change the behavior? What caused a person to act in the way they did? Just that is been on my heart, and I just wanted to share that. How can the community become more involved in mentoring and safeguarding and protecting our youths before the police comes in?
Any other thoughts? Well, I personally was very inspired by the restorative justice approach that was discussed in the various, and I think that's an area that we could become involved in with the league. I know of some of them in Delaware County. They do have a court diversion program where first-time offenders can get diverted, and we can volunteer to provide guidance for young people during their community service program. So there is some opportunities, I think, for us if we wanted to look into it, where we could be a part of some of the reform actually implemented in Delaware County. So we can talk about that again.
Barbara, hi.
Hi, Ann.
I just wanted to mention to Varma's point, I think it's really important. And I know, I believe the NAACP media is also working with this group, but the grassroots organization of the Delaware County Youth Education Alliance is a nice group of students and youth to work with on these issues. And it's this 12 o'clock time is not a good time for them to come onto a call like this. But I hope once we get the recording link, I'm going to send it to one of the leaders of that group, and hopefully she'll share it out and try to get the input from youth.
Great idea, Ann. Thank you. Yes, I just see a chat here. Kevin, thank you. I am familiar with the youth aid panels that they have in Delaware County with resolutions. So that's a great, great recommendation. Thank you, Kevin, for suggesting that in the chat. Well, it looks like we're about 1:39, and we're ready now to close the meeting. Thank you all for coming and for all your input and for the great job of the Civic Ed Committee as well as the Juvenile Law Center. Thank you all. See you at our next hot topic and our next Civic Ed program. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
On behalf of
Thank
the
you.
Thank you.
I thank all of you. I thank our panelists, Malik, Kevin, Marcus. Thank you all for being a part of this great discussion.